He wanted to expose the corporation that had destroyed his sister's life. But instead, he ruined the reputation of a billionaire who had dedicated his career to fighting injustice. The stolen document unleashed a wave of lies, turning a hero into a villain, and Darryl realized his pursuit of justice had only deepened the injustice. When the man whose name he had dragged through the mud knocked on his door, Darryl knew his next choice would change everything. What happened next will shock even the most seasoned. But let's start from the beginning. Darryl stood at the edge of the parking lot, his breath visible in the cool night air. The towering glass office building loomed over him, its reflective surface blending with the dark sky. The faint hum of traffic and the occasional wail of a distant siren were the only sounds breaking the stillness. His palms were sweaty despite the chill, and he wiped them on his weathered jeans, mentally rehearsing the plan for the 100th time. Magnacorp's name was etched into the glass doors, glowing faintly under the flickering fluorescent lights of the lobby. Darryl clenched the stolen keycard in his hand, a tiny piece of plastic that felt heavier than it should. This was for Shonda, he reminded himself. She had been devastated when Magnacorp foreclosed on her home, forcing her and her 2 kids into a cramped, overpriced apartment. Darryl couldn't stand seeing her struggle while the people responsible lived in luxury, profiting off the suffering of families like theirs. He scanned the deserted street one last time before darting toward the entrance. The keycard beeped softly against the scanner, and the door clicked open. Darryl slipped inside, his footsteps muffled by the thick carpet. The air was cold and sterile, tinged with the faint scent of disinfectant. Rows of glass-walled offices stretched out before him, each one immaculate and soulless. The hum of the fluorescent lights overhead seemed louder now, echoing in the stillness. His heart pounded as he moved through the space, his eyes darting between the office names etched on frosted glass doors. Finance, operations, legal. He read silently, his pulse quickening when he spotted the door labeled Archives. The lock on the door yielded to the keycard, and Darryl stepped inside, shutting the door softly behind him. The room was a maze of filing cabinets, metal shelves, and stacks of documents. The fluorescent lights cast long shadows, making the space feel like a labyrinth. Darryl's fingers trembled as he pulled open the first drawer, rifling through folders labeled with cold, corporate jargon. Quarterly reports, client acquisition. None of it meant anything to him. He needed something big, something explosive. Minutes ticked by as he tore through cabinets, his frustration mounting. Then he saw it, a thick sealed envelope in the back of a drawer labeled Martin Holdings, Acquisition Report. He pulled it free and turned it over in his hands, noting the official Magnacorp seal on the front. His gut told him this was it. Whatever it contained, it was important enough to be hidden in the deepest corner of the archives. He tucked the envelope into his jacket, his adrenaline surging as he made his way back out. The exit felt farther than it had before, every shadow now a potential threat. When he finally emerged into the night air, he exhaled sharply, his chest heaving. The thrill of success was fleeting, though, replaced almost instantly by a gnawing dread. He didn't know what the envelope contained, but he was certain it would either save his community or destroy everything. Darryl woke to the shrill ping of notifications flooding his phone. Bleary-eyed, he grabbed it from the nightstand, squinting at the screen. The words Magnacorp Scandal blared in bold letters across every news app and social media platform. His heart sank as he read the first post. Billionaire Martin Lewis, exposed for shady deals with corrupt developers. Who can we trust anymore? Panic surged through him. He scrambled out of bed, his bare feet hitting the cold floor as he fumbled to open a browser. Every headline echoed the same narrative. Martin Lewis, The celebrated black billionaire who had spent decades fighting for affordable housing was now accused of colluding with the very developers he claimed to oppose. The leaked document, which Darryl had stolen and uploaded to a whistleblower site, was being twisted to fit a damning story. Darryl felt his stomach churn. He had hoped the file would expose Magnacorp's illegal practices, but instead, it had turned into a weapon against a man who didn't deserve it. He scrolled through the responses, his hands trembling. Some praised the leak, others condemned it, but most latched onto the false narrative, spreading baseless theories like wildfire. News anchors speculated about Lewis's alleged greed, and politicians on both sides of the aisle weighed in. By the time Darryl reached a post speculating that federal investigations were imminent, he felt like throwing up. Across the city, Martin Lewis sat in his glass-walled penthouse office, his usually calm demeanor replaced by a steely frustration. His assistant, Vanessa, stood nearby, tablet in hand, rattling off the latest developments. CNN is running a special segment questioning your ethics. The Times has published an op-ed calling for your resignation from your own board. She paused, hesitating. It's everywhere, sir. Martin leaned back in his chair, his jaw tight. For over 30 years, he had fought to build not just a business empire, but a legacy of integrity. Rising from nothing, he had poured his heart into ethical housing projects, giving countless families a chance to escape poverty. Now, all of it hung in the balance. He picked up the document, his sharp eyes scanning its contents for the 100th time. The report detailed how Magnacorp had fraudulently acquired several properties under his company's name without his consent. But the headlines didn't care about the nuance. They only cared about the scandal. His grip tightened on the papers. "We need a full PR blitz," Martin said finally, his voice measured, despite the turmoil inside him. "Clarify the facts. I want the media to know this isn't about me. It's about Magnacorp's predatory tactics." Vanessa nodded, already typing out directives. "We traced the source of the leak," she added cautiously. "An amateur activist named Darryl Kendrick." Martin's eyebrows shot up. "Darryl Kendrick?" He leaned forward. "Find him. Bring him here. I want to know why this kid thought destroying my reputation was a good idea." As Vanessa left to handle the request, Martin's gaze fell on the city skyline. His reputation, his business, his mission, they were all on the line. And at the center of it all was a desperate young man who had just set the world on fire. The black SUV pulled to a halt on the cracked asphalt outside a decaying brick apartment building. Martin Lewis stepped out, his polished shoes landing on the uneven pavement. The building's chipped paint and rusted fire escapes were a stark contrast to the sleek, tailored navy suit he wore. Flanked by two aides with clipboards, Martin climbed the narrow, creaking stairs, his sharp eyes scanning the grimy hallway. Inside, Darryl sat on a sagging couch, the envelope he had stolen now stuffed into a drawer. When the knock came, his stomach dropped. Opening the door, he froze at the sight of the billionaire whose name was now trending for all the wrong reasons. Martin, calm but intense, crossed the threshold without waiting for an invitation, his tall frame filling the tiny apartment. "Mr. Lewis," Darryl stammered, his voice barely audible. I didn't mean for it to happen like this. I was trying to—" Martin raised a hand, silencing him. "Save it," he said evenly. "You've got two choices. Run and let this lie ruin everything I've worked for, or help me fix the mess you started." His voice, though steady, carried the weight of years of struggle and the urgency of a collapsing legacy. Darryl, overwhelmed by shame and desperation, nodded. "I'll help. Just tell me what to do." In the hours that followed, the two men, one driven by anger, the other by remorse, laid out their strategy. Martin's legal team would release the full context of the stolen document, exposing Magna Corp's exploitation of black-owned businesses. Meanwhile, Darryl mobilized grassroots activists to amplify the truth, leveraging his network to challenge the false narrative. For the first time, Darryl felt a glimmer of hope, not for redemption, but for justice. Days later, Martin held a press conference, standing firm as reporters hurled questions. He calmly dismantled the false narrative and revealed indisputable evidence of Magna Corp's corruption. Footage of Darryl's heartfelt apology and testimony went viral, earning sympathy for his cause. As investigations opened against Magna Corp, Martin extended an olive branch to Darryl, offering him a position at a nonprofit he funded to combat housing discrimination. "We all make mistakes," Martin said. "It's what you do after that defines you." In the end, Magna Corp's CEO resigned in disgrace, and Martin's legacy emerged stronger than ever. Darryl, humbled and inspired, began rebuilding his life, determined to atone for his reckless act. The office break-in had been just the beginning of a journey neither man could have anticipated, one that exposed systemic injustice and proved the power of redemption.